Despite their militant fervor, the war hawks and other pro-war Republicans ignore one glaring fact. The United States is completely unprepared to wage war. We have long been habituated to despise the Americans, sneers a British officer, as an enemy unworthy of serious regard.
At the beginning of the War of 1812, the American military is practically impotent. It is a collection of small companies scattered around the United States. It is a constabulary force designed to police and enforce America's laws, but it's really a token force. Actually, they're more of a danger to themselves than to the enemy, from inept leadership.
The officers who had served in the Revolution have now died away or retired, so this is a whole new generation of leadership, none of which has seen substantial combat, all of whom underestimate the substantial challenges they'll have to face.
On the other hand, the British Army is at the height of its professional competence. The troops are well trained, they're well equipped. Their officer corps, unlike the American officer corps at the beginning of the War of 1812, is young, quite young, yet very experienced.
What makes the British Army the best is determination, refusal to accept defeat. In the face of everything that might sensibly say, "You are gone," the British will stick at it and will continue until they succeed.
And yet another glaring drawback faces the United States. It has no real navy to speak of.
The British Navy is a huge problem. The Americans are never going to be able to create anything to compete with the size of the British Navy. So what do? We do have sailors. We do have merchants. We do have entrepreneurial, successful business people. So the Congress encourages privateers, people to go out privately and raid British shipping, hoping to kind of level the field.
On the international scene, the American people of 1812 are viewed as unsophisticated, disorganized, and unrealistic. And that is just how they will fight this war. The disparity between British and American forces becomes immediately apparent in the days following the outbreak of the conflict. Just weeks after war is declared, military commanders target Britain's last stronghold in North America, Canada.
The war hawks in Congress were already getting aggressively interested in Canada. They thought this is their way to get back at England for what they saw of insults to the American flag, impressment of seamen. They thought Canada would be easy pickings.
What are they thinking? We've got 7.5 million people in the United States, and that's still not enough to settle all the land we have. Why are they casting an eye on Canada? We don't even have militiamen who are willing to cross that border.
What many had once predicted would be a matter of mere marching turns into one of the biggest blunders in American military history.
America is ill-prepared to defend its western borders, and the opening years of the war are just a series of unmitigated disasters for the young nation. Mackinac Falls, Dearborn Falls, Detroit Falls with virtually no resistance by the Americans. America simply cannot stand up to the military force of Great Britain during this time.
Of all the forts to fall, Detroit is the most disastrous. 2,000 men surrender without firing a single musket. It is an ominous beginning to what would become a confusing and drawn-out engagement. The one bright spot in these early days comes from one of the few ships of the non-existent U.S. Navy. Just 3 days after American forces surrender Detroit, the USS Constitution finds the HMS Guerrière off the New England coast. For the crew of the Constitution, the battle is intensely personal. The Guerrière is one of the most famous of the ships noted for impressment. Over the next 3 hours, the two slug it out. When solid shot fired from Guerrière's guns fails to penetrate the Constitution's solid oak timbers, the American vessel earns its immortal nickname, Old Ironsides. The Constitution returns to Massachusetts a hero, and a conflict that began in a political haze has its first real victory. It would be short-lived. As the War of 1812 drags into 1813, the campaign to conquer Canada has mostly misfired. But that April, the Americans enflame the British. and set the stage for the most dramatic act of revenge in the war. On April 27th, American troops attack York, the capital of Upper Canada, and set fire to the Parliament building. The British will not forget this act of devastation. Just 1 year later, they will launch the first invasion of the United States and bring the war right to President Madison's doorstep. From its outset, the War of 1812 has been of secondary concern to the British. For the previous 9 years, they've been preoccupied in an epic war against the greatest military genius of the age, Napoleon.
With the war going on against Napoleon in Europe, the British are very tight on what soldiers can be sent over to the Americas. They have a few regiments in the country, the one stationed in Canada, of course. So the main thing is a holding action. Once America has been stopped from the invasion of Canada, there's very little that Britain can do until Napoleon is out of the way.
In early 1814, the British finally defeat the French emperor. That July, thousands of battle-tested redcoats set sail for the Chesapeake Bay to launch the first invasion of the United States. American troops, who have been fighting in mostly poorly trained and poorly equipped militias for almost 2 years, are about to face a force unlike any they have ever seen. The British have every reason to expect victory. For the past year, the British fleet in North America has been tightening its blockade of the Atlantic coast. Leading the offensive is a man for whom America's destruction is a personal vendetta, Vice Admiral Sir Alexander Cochrane.
Sir Alexander Cochrane has a very strong distaste for anything American. This is actually brought about because he had a cousin killed in the American Revolution. He himself was in the Navy at that time and fought against the Americans, and this has conditioned him to have what would really be seen as almost an obsession about the Americans.
In 1814, from the deck of his flagship, Cochrane had issued orders that reflected the pending British onslaught and his personal obsession.
Destroy and lay waste such towns and districts as you may find assailable. I want to give the enemy a complete drubbing before it's all over.
Vice Admiral George Cockburn carried out Cochrane's orders with merciless efficiency.
There's an interesting quote from Admiral Cockburn where he suggested that Americans should be treated like a naughty spaniel. That is to say, if it snaps at you, you hit it on the nose. And this is exactly what he was doing.
In the spring and summer of 1813, Cockburn launches raids at will along the Chesapeake, plundering villages before burning them to the ground. It is just a sampling of things to come.
The British are wreaking havoc on the American countryside. There's virtually no opposition. The American military presence is not in the Chesapeake in the way it should be. All important regular assets are up along the Canadian border. So it's up to the Maryland, Virginia militia to defend an extensive border. They can't keep up.
Some of these soldiers are just thugs. They are burning homes. They are raping women. The countryside is devastated. The people are horrified. It's almost like a game to Admiral Cockburn. Let's see what we can get away with here.
The fear of more British raids and news of thousands of redcoats on the way soon reaches the capital. This new attack is a complete surprise for Madison. His administration is in turmoil, and he hesitates to act, mainly because of one man.
The capital remained undefended, and the principal reason was the Secretary of War, John Armstrong. He was one of those characters history throws up time and time again. Men who believe that their judgment is best for everybody else, even when reality to the contrary stares them in the face.
By God, they would not come with such a fleet without meaning to strike somewhere. But they certainly will not come here. What the devil will they do here?